It's time to take a look at what's happening around Wyoming for Monday, October 21st. I'm Wendy Corr, bringing you headlines from the Cowboy State Daily newsroom, brought to you by the Cowboy State Daily Morning Show with Jake. From 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Monday through Friday, Cowboy State Daily's Jake Nichols brings to life the latest news, weather, sports, and in-depth conversations that matter to you. Well, during the Panhandle fire in Texas last year, a lot of Wyomingites stepped up to help deliver hay and other necessities to stricken ranches. Texas took note of all that help, and Cowboy State Daily's Renee Jean says they're now returning the favor in the wake of the Elk Fire, the Pack Trail Fire, and other devastating wildfires that have burned in excess of 810,000 acres in Wyoming so far this season.
This is a slow burning crisis in America. The more farms and ranches we lose, the less able we are to feed our families, and the more our products go up retail. And so really it is in fact a slow motion crisis. You don't see the headlines about it because it's not so immediately gripping. These ranchers have suffered devastating losses, and it's great that this group is willing to help not just Texas, but any ranch that's in trouble because of natural disasters. They're there to help step in where there's really right now nothing helping these guys overcome.
The effect of the Elk Fire, which has burned more than 96,000 acres, is likely to linger for a long time, particularly for the affected ranches. They've lost all important hay to feed their cattle through the winter, as well as rangelands that will need to rest at least a year before animals can once again graze them. Well, for the first time in weeks, neither the Pack Trail nor the Elk Fire burning in different areas of northern Wyoming are reporting any growth. The rain and snow brought by the cold snap cooled off some of the hottest parts of the blaze and has allowed firefighting crews to start to get the upper hand on controlling it. But Cowboy State Daily's Greg Johnson reports that the changing weather was just a short reprieve.
Now that it's warming up again, it's getting a little drier again. The conditions for the fire are going to be a little more favorable to the fire. However, they don't expect it to come back nearly as volatile as it was before.
This week's blast of winter has allowed officials to let nearly everyone evacuated by the fires go home. All that is, except for one primary residence near the mouth of the Tongue River Canyon just southwest of Dayton, which is still located within the Elk Fire's perimeter. The Beckler River Soldier Station in the southwest corner of Yellowstone National Park is one of the park's many backcountry entrances, and the area accessed through the park's least used entrance is an oasis of blue and green in the vast expanse of Yellowstone. Cowboy State Daily's Andrew Rossi writes that the Beckler Station is so far into the undeveloped wilderness that only the most determined visitors journey to see it.
There's so much water in that region that Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming wanted to dam the Beckler River and get irrigation going in there. They wanted to tap into that water source, and it was ultimately decided in the 1930s that Beckler was better within the boundaries of Yellowstone and not part of this commercial development.
Yellowstone refers to the Beckler region as the park's least traveled entrance on social media because it's so far from any developed areas inside or outside the park. Well, in his near decade of rescuing sex trafficking survivors in South America, Tyler Schwab of Afton, Wyoming, has seen and heard some terrible things. His anti-human trafficking nonprofit Libertas International has helped rescue more than 100 girls throughout South America. But Cowboy State Daily's Jen Coker says the story of an 18-year-old girl from Argentina named Blue is one of the worst that he's ever heard.
She was first sexually abused by her father at age 7, and that abuse continued until age 14, and then her mother began sex trafficking her to strangers. What really struck me about her is she tried to get help. She tried several times, and finally somebody in the office had called this guy Tyler at Libertas International. She's been with the group now for 2 years. Her trafficker was just arrested this month, and they are in the process of extraditing him to Colombia to face charges. And also, she's also now turned in her parents to the Colombian police, and that investigation is currently playing out.
Blue speaks near perfect English that she taught herself after escaping her trafficker. She's studying musical production and programming and writes songs for kids, teaching them how to say no. Well, in 1951, a hunting trip in Wyoming's backcountry took a dire turn for a teenage hunter when he became lost in a thick fog. He believes that he would have come to a tragic end, except for a supernatural intervention that to this day he cannot explain. Cowboy State Daily's Jackie Dorothy brings us this spooky ghost story from the Bighorn Mountains.
Dylan was lost in 1932. He was a 17-year-old up in the Bighorn Mountains at Trappers Creek, and there was a huge search party for him. People were looking for him for weeks, and when they finally found him, unfortunately, he had passed away. And the circumstances surrounding it were snow, fog, everything that occurred 19 years later to another 17-year-old. This 17-year-old was caught in a storm. The fog was getting thick. He got lost, and a boy in a flannel shirt showed up. So you'll have to read the story to find out the rest.
And now let's take a look at today's weather with Cowboy State Daily meteorologist Don Day.
Well, other than a little bit of light shower activity in the far southern parts of the state, mainly early in the day along the Colorado border area, the rest of Wyoming will enjoy some nice autumn weather. We really cleared out over the weekend in many areas, and generally that trend today and tomorrow will continue. Now, we have a bit of a front that'll come in Tuesday night, Wednesday. This could spread some showers over the northern parts of Wyoming, including the northern Bighorn Mountains near the Elk Fire. It'll cool us off a little bit midweek. We've got another frontal system, not a big one, coming our way towards the weekend. So now it's finally acting like it should this time of year, which means you're still going to have some nice days, but we're not going to have these very warm days. And occasionally fronts will be moving through.
You can get Don's full forecast on the Cowboy State Daily website. I'll be back in just 20 seconds with more news.
When we say community is the heart of Hilltop, we're talking about a team of bankers committed to improving the place we call home. A team that shows up every day to help businesses thrive and gives back to our neighbors through time, attention, and service. We're inspired by the way our bankers give back because that's one of the many qualities that makes us truly a community bank. Hilltop Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
A Douglas man with a long and troubling military background has been found guilty of second-degree murder for shooting his cousin to death last year. Cowboy State Daily's Claire McFarland reports that the verdict for 44-year-old Mark Helms came after a week-long jury trial in Converse County District Court. The main argument was whether he was mentally competent enough to rationalize what he was doing the night of September 13th, 2023, when he shot Nicholas Velasquez to death.
The trial, according to the clerk of district court, was about whether his post-traumatic stress disorder was so severe that the night he killed Nicholas Velasquez, he couldn't rationalize his conduct. Wyoming law says if you are too mentally ill to rationalize your conduct or conform it to the law, then you can't be found guilty.
After deliberating for roughly 3.5 hours, the jury chose second-degree murder, which means the jurors believe Helms killed Velasquez purposefully and maliciously, but without premeditation. The federal government might remove endangered species protection for wolves across the lower 48, but that doesn't mean other states will follow the lead of Wyoming when it comes to hunting wolves. At the pause on the ground level, it will likely be up to each individual state to determine how to manage wolves. That's what a retired federal game warden told Outdoors reporter Mark Hines.
This would affect, of course, that big population of wolves in the Great Lakes area, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota, as well as the, kind of the growing population of wolves we have in Oregon, Washington, and California, as well as the wolves down in Colorado, which are just been recently reintroduced there. As far as any of these states ever mirroring what's happening here in Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho, probably not anytime soon.
The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service recently stated that it would like to have a nationwide wolf management plan in place, possibly by late next year. A state legislator says the future of a coal mine that employs hundreds of Sheridan County people is threatened by proposed federal regulation. Cyrus Western is worried that the feds will cut the Spring Creek mine's available coal by half because of a proposed revision to an environmental impact statement. Cowboy State Daily's Leah Wolfson reports that the mine, which is located just north of the Wyoming border, is not in imminent danger of closing, but continued restrictions will halt its growth.
as a business continues on, it always wants to continue expanding. And I think that's what's kind of at risk here and at play in this situation. The company says, Navajo says, that it would reduce coal output in the short term as well, just by virtue of throwing everything in doubt. So it's not necessarily like people are going to be losing jobs immediately, but it's kind of a death by 1,000 cuts type deal.
The mine now has a projected life through about 2038 with 152 million recoverable tons of coal now under lease. And how far will a tortoise stray from home? Well, if it's determined enough, at least a mile uphill, given the jailbreak of a fugitive tortoise in northwest Wyoming. Cowboy State Daily's Andrew Rossi spoke to residents of Wapiti, between Cody and Yellowstone, who were startled to discover a tortoise on the loose in neighborhoods where grizzlies roam free.
It had an outdoor enclosure that's kept it happy for several years, and then one day it decided it was done, climbed over a boulder, and not only escaped and left the property, they found it a mile away, higher in elevation. So that just goes to show how determined and obstinate and ornery these giant tortoises can be. But I was told that Sheldon the tortoise was very happy to return home after his mile-long excursion out of his outdoor pen.
When it comes to getting out of his outdoor habitats, Sheldon's a habitual offender. According to his owner, this is Sheldon's third escape. And that's today's news. Get your free digital subscription to Wyoming's only statewide newspaper by hitting the daily newsletter button on cowboystatedaily.com. And you can watch this newscast every day by clicking subscribe on our YouTube channel. And don't forget to drop in on the Cowboy State Daily Morning Show with Jake Nichols, Monday through Friday from 6 to 10 a.m. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Wendy Corr for Cowboy State Daily.